The Conjuring, Last Rites, the full movie analyzed and explained. The Conjuring, Last Rites arrives not merely as another chapter, but as a deliberate and poignant full stop to the saga of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Under the direction of Michael Chavez, the film frames itself as a finale from the outset, weaving together the personal and the paranormal in a manner that seeks to resolve the central couple's journey. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga return, their performances imbued with a weary familiarity that grounds the escalating supernatural events in a palpable, human reality. This installment, while engaging in the series' trademark haunted house mechanics, is ultimately a film about endings, about legacy, and about the family unit as the ultimate sanctuary against the darkness they have spent a lifetime confronting. The narrative architecture of the film is cleverly constructed across two timelines, bound by a single malignant artifact. It opens in 1964 with a pregnant Lorraine investigating a curious antique mirror in a cluttered shop. This prologue is crucial, establishing the stakes in the most intimate way possible. The demonic force within the mirror does not just threaten Lorraine. It triggers a premature labor, a direct assault on her motherhood. The subsequent scene at the hospital, where Judy is born stillborn, is one of the franchise's most emotionally raw moments. The desperate prayers of Ed and Lorraine, their faith weaponized in its purest form, result in a miracle, Judy's revival. This act marks her not just as a survivor, but as a soul touched by and therefore targeted by the supernatural from her first breath. The main story leaps forward to 1986, introducing the Smurl family in Pennsylvania. Their haunting, while terrifying, serves a dual narrative purpose. On one level, it presents the classic Conjuring scenario, a good family besieged by escalating poltergeist activity, including three distinct and malevolent spirits, an old crone, a younger woman, and a brutish, axe-wielding man. On another level, their plight is the catalyst that pulls the Warrens, now retired, back into the fray. The gift of the cursed mirror to the Smurl daughter is a tragic irony, a perfect example of evil circulating through the innocent channels of daily life. The haunting here is aggressive, but it feels intentionally familiar, a callback to the rhythms that define the earlier films. The retirement of Ed and Lorraine is a significant character beat. Ed's worsening heart condition is a stark reminder of their mortality, a physical vulnerability that no amount of spiritual knowledge can cure. Their desire for a quiet life is deeply earned, making their eventual return all the more powerful. This personal crisis is mirrored in their adult daughter, Judy, portrayed with compelling sensitivity by Mia Tomlinson. Judy is not a child anymore, but a woman grappling with the weight of her inheritance, not of possessions, but of perception. Her psychic visions are intensifying, a torrent she cannot control, symbolizing the unresolved burden of her miraculous birth. She is the living legacy of her parents' battle, and the film posits that this legacy cannot be outrun. The catalyst for the final mission is Judy's own agency. Learning of the Smurl case through Father Gordon, a priest she confides in, she takes matters into her own hands, traveling to Pennsylvania. This act of defiance, born of both empathy and a need to understand her own nature, forces Ed and Lorraine out of retirement. They are not chasing a story, they are racing to protect their daughter. This inversion, the investigators becoming the personally invested rescuers, elevates the stakes beyond any previous film. The suicide of Father Gordon, a grim testament to the mirror demon's power, confirms that this entity is of a particularly vicious order, one with a history specifically tied to the Warrens. Lorraine's investigation into the mirror's history reveals the tragic core of the Smurl haunting. The three spirits are victims, not villains, a mother, daughter, and father who were murdered and whose souls are trapped and twisted by a stronger demonic presence within the mirror itself. This revelation reframes the conflict. The Warrens must not only liberate a family from these ghosts, but also contend with the puppeteer holding their strings. The demon is soon revealed to be the very same entity from the 1964 prologue, completing a narrative circle. It has been waiting, and its target has always been Judy, the miracle child who escaped its grasp once before. The climax shifts to the Warrens' own home, as the demon bypasses the Smurls entirely to launch its final assault on Judy. The possession sequence is harrowing, not just for its visual intensity, but for its psychological cruelty. The demon uses Judy's body as a weapon against her parents, attempting to force her to hang herself, a direct, intimate violence that is hard to watch. It is here that the film's core theme crystallizes. Ed, weakened by his heart, and Lorraine, realizing the limits of her own power, understand they cannot fight this battle for Judy. They must fight it with her. The resolution is a testament to the series' enduring thesis that love and faith, when combined with unwavering will, form an insurmountable force. Lorraine does not exorcise the demon from Judy through ritual alone. Instead, she guides Judy to embrace her own latent abilities. The climax becomes a synergy of their psychic power, a mother and daughter joining hands, both literally and metaphysically, to confront the darkness. Their combined strength, focused through prayer and familial bond, is what ultimately shatters the mirror and banishes the demon. This is the true passing of the torch. Judy is not a damsel saved. She is an equal participant in her own salvation, accepting her gifts as a part of her identity rather than a curse. The themes of family as defense and legacy are woven throughout the fabric of the film. The Smurl haunting, while terrifying, is ultimately a professional case for the Warrens. The attack on Judy is personal. The film argues that the vulnerabilities created by love, the fear of losing a child, are also the sources of our greatest strength. The Warrens' expertise, their artifacts, their knowledge, all are secondary to their unwavering commitment to each other. Furthermore, the entire narrative arc serves to validate Judy's journey. Her struggles with her visions are not framed as a weakness, but as a difficult awakening, necessary for her to claim her place as the next guardian in the line. The emotional closure provided in the final act is generous and warm. After the chaos subsides, we are granted a vision of peace. The scene of Ed and Lorraine dancing at Judy's wedding is a beautiful, quiet moment of triumph. They have earned their rest. Lorraine's final vision, shared with Ed, of them as joyful grandparents in a sun-drenched future, offers a definitive end to their story. It assures the audience that after a lifetime in the shadows, the light has finally, truly, won for them. This departure from ambiguity is a gift to the characters and the audience who have followed them. Critically, the film received a mixed response, a reaction largely tied to its dual identity as both a Conjuring horror film and a series finale. The praise was overwhelmingly directed at the emotional core and the lead performances. Wilson and Farmiga are the soul of the franchise, and their portrayal of a couple facing the twilight of their extraordinary career is heartfelt and authentic. The focus on character closure was widely appreciated by fans invested in the Warrens' journey. However, the criticism often centered on the film's horror mechanics. Many reviewers noted a reliance on formulaic jump scares and a haunted house blueprint that felt overly familiar. The Smurl family, while effectively portraying terror, sometimes felt underdeveloped, a necessary device to propel the Warrens' personal story forward rather than a fully realized tragedy in their own right. Compared to the innovative, set-piece-driven terror engineered by James Wan in the first two films, the scares in Last Rites can feel functional, designed to service a plot racing toward its emotional conclusion rather than to pioneer new nightmares. At the box office, the film proved the enduring appeal of the franchise, becoming the highest-grossing entry in the main series. This commercial success underscores a key point. While critics may have found the scares predictable, audiences turned out for the farewell. The film functions as a satisfying piece of franchise storytelling, rewarding long-term viewers with payoff and resonance. Looking forward, The Conjuring, Last Rites deliberately leaves the door ajar for the universe to continue, even as it closes the book on Ed and Lorraine. The focus on Judy's acceptance of her powers and her relationship with Tony Spera is a clear setup. A new chapter could easily follow the Warren Spera files, exploring cases through Judy's unique psychic lens, perhaps with a cameo artifact or two from her parents' museum. This would allow the franchise to evolve while maintaining a tangible link to its origins. Furthermore, the expansive universe built around the Warrens' artifact room, the Annabelles, the nuns, the crooked men, remains fertile ground. Spin-offs can continue to explore these entities, existing in a shared world where the Warren legacy is a foundational myth. The producer's mention of this being the end of Phase 1 suggests a deliberate strategy to refresh the narrative engine with new protagonists or anthology-style stories. In comparison to its predecessors, Last Rites occupies a unique space. It lacks the groundbreaking, precision-engineered horror of James Wan's original The Conjuring, a film that redefined the haunted house genre for a new generation. It does not have the elaborate, London-set Gothic grandeur and a villain as iconic as the nun in The Conjuring 2. It also steps away from the courtroom procedural experiment of The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, Its strength is not in novelty of form, but in depth of feeling. It is a film that measures its success not by how many times it makes you jump, but by how moved you are when Ed and Lorraine share their final dance. In the final analysis, The Conjuring, Last Rites is a work of poignant genre synthesis. It delivers the required spectral threats and tense exorcism sequences, but its heart lies in the quiet moments between the scares. A husband comforting his wife, a mother guiding her daughter, a couple looking back on a life of service and forward to a hard-won peace. It is a farewell letter to two beloved characters, affirming that after all the demons, all the darkness, and all the fear, the most powerful force they ever channeled was their love for each other and for their family. It concludes not with a scream, but with a sigh of contentment, and for the Warrens, that is the happiest ending of all. The narrative elegantly binds these two timelines through the cursed mirror, an artifact of profound malice. This object serves not merely as a conduit for spirits, but as a prison for souls and a beacon for a specific demonic force. The mirror's history is one of tragedy, its glass reflecting not images but absorbing the pain of its victims. Its journey from the curio shop to the Smurl home illustrates the insidious way evil circulates through society, masquerading as innocent antique treasure. The malevolence within is patient, waiting decades for the perfect moment to strike at its chosen target. This patient evil transforms a simple household object into a portal of relentless terror. The mirror's design, perhaps ornate and aged, belies the pure darkness it contains within its frame. Each reflection captured might subtly distort, a visual hint of the corruption festering inside its silvered depths. The three spirits bound to it are tragic figures, their original identities erased by torment. They become puppets of a greater darkness, compelled to reenact their pain upon the living. The axe-wielding man, the sorrowful woman, and the vengeful crone represent a twisted family unit, a dark mirror to the Warrens' own. Their attacks on the Smurls are brutal yet formulaic, following a pattern of haunting the franchise has established. Yet their presence is a smokescreen, a distraction from the primary entity's deeper, more personal goal. The demon using them is a strategist, employing proxies to weaken its ultimate prey. The mirror thus becomes the physical and symbolic heart of the film's conflict, a totem that must be destroyed to sever the link between worlds. Shifting to the core protagonists, Ed and Lorraine Warren's retirement is portrayed with a gentle melancholy. Their home, once a bastion of research and respite, now feels like a museum of their past exploits. Ed's heart condition is a masterful narrative device, introducing a vulnerability no sacrament can cure. It grounds the characters in a poignant reality, reminding us that even demonologists are subject to mortal frailties. Lorraine's care for him speaks volumes about their partnership, now tested by time rather than spirits. Their decision to step away from the work is treated with respect, an earned peace after countless battles. This retirement makes their eventual return not a thrill-seeking adventure, but a profound sacrifice. Every moment back in the field carries the tangible risk of Ed's health failing. This personal stake amplifies the tension far beyond the typical supernatural threat. Their expertise remains, but it is now tempered with the caution of age and the weight of legacy. The love they share is their quiet strength, a constant throughline more powerful than any prayer book. Seeing them in domestic stillness makes their eventual mobilization all the more powerful. Their legacy is not just in their case files, but in the quiet life they built and are now forced to jeopardize. This forced return reframes them not as fearless warriors, but as courageous, vulnerable human beings making one final choice for family. Their daughter, Judy Warren, emerges from the periphery to claim a central, dynamic role in this finale. Her struggle is internal, a battle with the psychic inheritance she never asked for. The visions are not gifts but intrusions, violent psychic episodes that isolate her from a normal life. She represents the hidden cost of her parents' vocation, a life forever touched by the other side. Her relationship with her parents is layered with love, frustration, and a desperate need for understanding. She seeks guidance from Father Gordon, indicating a search for her own path outside her parents' shadow. Her decision to go to Pennsylvania is an act of defiant empathy and a quest for self-discovery. It is the catalyst that breaks the stalemate of her parents' retirement and the hauntings' escalation. This action proves she possesses her parents' courage, even if her abilities feel like a curse. Her character arc is the film's most significant evolution, tracing a journey from burdened survivor to empowered participant. Her psychic abilities are depicted as raw and untrained, a storm of impressions she cannot control. This lack of control makes her a potent, unstable conduit, which the demon seeks to exploit. By targeting Judy, the entity attacks the Warrens' most meaningful creation, their family. Her possession is therefore the ultimate personal violation, a desecration of their private world. Her ultimate triumph is not just over the demon, but over her own fear of the power within her. The Smurl family haunting provides the procedural backbone of the film, the classic case that draws our heroes in. Their terror is visceral and effectively staged, with the three entities creating a cacophony of fear. The old crone represents a corrupted maternal figure, her appearances dripping with a particularly invasive malice. The younger woman's spirit embodies a sorrow so deep it curdles into violence, a reminder of the mirror's tragic history. The axe-wielding man introduces a threat of immediate physical brutality, a departure from more spectral terrors. Their haunting tactics feel familiar to Conjuring veterans, a deliberate echo of the franchise's past. However, their story serves primarily as the inciting incident, the professional call that becomes profoundly personal. The grandfather's role is tragically ironic, his loving gift unknowingly unleashing hell upon his family. The Smurl's reactions are believable, a progression from confusion to sheer terror that the Warrens must later navigate. Their home becomes a battleground, but the war's objective shifts to a different front entirely. While their suffering is real, the narrative uses it to explore the Warrens' methodology one final time. The investigation into the mirror's past, led by Lorraine, is a return to the franchise's roots in historical research. The revelation that the spirits are victims reframes the moral complexity of the situation, demanding liberation, not just banishment. This aspect ensures the Smurl case retains an emotional core beyond simple monster hunting. The demonic antagonist itself is a creature of specific and personal vengeance, its motives intricately tied to the Warrens' past. Its failure in 1964, thwarted by the miracle of Judy's revival, created a cosmic grudge. This entity operates with a chilling patience, manipulating events across decades to position its pawns. Its power is demonstrated not just through supernatural terror, but through psychological warfare, driving Father Gordon to suicide. This act shows its ability to corrupt faith and exploit despair, making it a formidable foe. Its control over the three mirror spirits shows a hierarchical, commanding form of evil. The choice to possess Judy is its masterstroke, aiming to turn the Warrens' love into their own weapon of despair. During the possession, the demon's voice and actions are a cruel mockery of Judy's identity, designed to break her parents' will. It represents a more intelligent, strategic threat than a mindless force of nature. Its connection to the mirror makes it uniquely anchored, a vulnerability the Warrens must ultimately discover and exploit. The final confrontation is therefore a battle on multiple levels: physical, spiritual, and deeply psychological. Its defeat requires a new tactic, not a repeated ritual, forcing the Warrens to evolve in their final stand. This demon's legacy is ultimately what forges Judy's own strength, making it an unwitting catalyst for the very legacy it sought to destroy. The film's climactic sequence within the Warren home is a masterclass in shifting the locus of terror. The safe space is violated, transforming familiar rooms into a haunted labyrinth. The demon's use of Judy's body to attempt suicide is the film's most horrifying moment, blending supernatural horror with intimate familial tragedy. Ed's physical limitation during this crisis adds a layer of desperate helplessness to the scene. Lorraine's realization that she cannot fight for Judy, but must fight with her, is the thematic climax of the entire series. The combined psychic effort is visualized with potent symbolism, perhaps as a converging light or a resonant soundscape pushing back the darkness. Their joined hands become a circuit, channeling their shared strength into a unified force. This synergy of mother and daughter presents a new paradigm for confronting evil, one built on legacy and trust. The destruction of the mirror is both a literal and figurative shattering of the curse's anchor. The banishing of the demon feels conclusive, a final victory earned through sacrifice and unity rather than simple exorcism. This resolution provides a satisfying emotional payoff that resonates more deeply than any jump scare possibly could. Thematic explorations of family legacy and acceptance form the film's philosophical backbone. The story posits that true strength lies not in denying one's nature, but in embracing and directing it. Judy's journey mirrors a classic heroic archetype, the reluctant heir who must claim her throne. The film contrasts the Warren family's functional love with the twisted, spectral family in the mirror. It argues that the bonds we choose and nurture are our ultimate protection against the chaos of the world. The passing of the torch is not presented as a duty, but as a natural and necessary evolution. Ed and Lorraine's legacy is shown to be alive and active in their daughter, not just preserved in glass cases. The theme of faith is also deeply interwoven, presented not as blind dogma, but as an active, loving force. Their faith is in each other, in their daughter, and in the fundamental goodness they fight to preserve. The closure they receive is a narrative reward for a lifetime of service, a concept that resonates on a fundamental human level. The film suggests that even in a world of demons, the most meaningful battles are for the people we love. Cinematic technique and direction by Michael Chavez honor the series' visual language while focusing on character. The cinematography likely employs the series' signature sweeping camera work, transitioning to more intimate, shaky frames during moments of terror. The use of practical effects for the entities grounds them in a tangible reality, making their violations of space more impactful. The production design of the two time periods, 1964 and 1986, is crucial in establishing tone and nostalgia. The score, presumably by a composer like Joseph Bashara, would weave familiar motifs from earlier films with new, emotionally resonant themes for Judy. The pacing deliberately allows for character moments between set pieces, understanding that the audience's investment is the primary source of tension. Chavez's direction shows a clearer handle on character than in his previous Conjuring 3, guided by a script demanding emotional resolution. The film's color palette may evolve from the cold blues of the haunting to the warm golds of the final wedding scene. Sound design plays a critical role, using silence and sudden, distorted noises to keep the audience in a state of unease. The film's visual effects serve the story, emphasizing the supernatural intrusions without overwhelming the human drama at the core. The final scenes provide a denouement of remarkable warmth and catharsis for longtime viewers. Judy's wedding symbolizes a new beginning, a celebration of life and love triumphing over the darkness that marked her origin. Ed and Lorraine dancing is a perfect, wordless metaphor for the harmonious partnership that defined their lives. Lorraine's shared vision of their future as grandparents offers a glimpse of a peaceful legacy they directly fought to secure. This vision validates every sacrifice, every nightmare, every moment of fear they endured. It provides a definitive end to their story arc, allowing them to ride off into a figurative sunset of domestic bliss. The film doesn't tease a next case or a lurking shadow. It offers a firm and loving conclusion. This choice prioritizes emotional satisfaction over franchise prolongation, a brave and respectful decision. The final shot, perhaps of their smiling faces or their clasped hands, lingers on the love story rather than the horror story. It confirms that the Conjuring series was, at its heart, always about the enduring bond between these two people. This conclusion allows the audience to say a genuine goodbye, leaving them with a sense of completion rather than anticipation for more scares. Within the broader Conjuring universe, this film acts as a keystone, locking the central narrative into place. It creates a full-circle narrative that enriches the re-watching of the entire series, knowing where the journey ultimately ends. The film's success at the box office proves the enduring cultural connection to these characters and this world. Its commercial performance ensures that the franchise will continue, even if the central thread is complete. The potential future focusing on Judy Warren offers a path forward that maintains continuity while allowing for fresh stories and perspectives. Spin-offs can now operate with the understanding that the Warrens' tale has reached its natural endpoint. The occult museum, glimpsed perhaps in the film, remains a treasure trove of potential stories for other filmmakers to explore. Last Rites gives the overarching universe a sense of history and consequence, elevating it beyond a mere collection of scary movies. It provides a foundational mythos from which all other stories can emanate. The film ultimately succeeds in its most difficult task, ending a beloved story in a way that feels both definitive and satisfying, honoring the past while gently closing the book that mentioned la qualite etla coherence. The Conjuring, Last Rites masterfully utilizes its central artifact, the mirror, as a narrative and symbolic linchpin. This object transcends its role as a mere haunted item to become a character in its own right, a silent witness to generations of suffering. Its reflective surface acts as a perverse gateway, not simply showing what is, but revealing what could be or what has been, warping reality for those who encounter it. The craftsmanship of the frame, possibly Baroque and imposing, suggests it was once an object of beauty and value, making its corrupted nature all the more tragic. Within its glass, the boundaries between the past and present dissolve, allowing the trapped souls to replay their torment endlessly. The demon's choice of this vessel is telling. It exploits humanity's vanity and our innate trust in our own reflection. For the Smurl family, the mirror becomes an unwanted window into a nightmare, distorting their safe domestic space. The three bound spirits are not random, but likely represent a perverse inversion of the Holy Trinity, a mockery of spiritual wholeness. Their torment is cyclical, and they are compelled to inflict their pain on new families, perpetuating a chain of misery. The film cleverly uses the mirror's mechanics, perhaps having figures appear in the reflection that are not present in the room, a classic yet effective trope of unease. Destroying it becomes the ultimate catharsis, a shattering of the cyclical curse that has persisted for decades. The act of breaking the glass is both a physical and metaphysical release, freeing the victims and severing the demon's anchor to our world. This resolution reinforces a core theme of the franchise, that evil often requires a physical anchor, a tether that can be identified and severed by those with the knowledge and courage to do so. The emotional core of the film is irrevocably tied to the evolution of the Warrens' partnership, now tested by time and mortality. Their retirement is not portrayed as an end, but as a different phase of their bond, one focused on care and quiet companionship. Ed's heart condition symbolizes the inevitable wearing down of the physical form, a stark contrast to the undying, spectral threats they have faced. This vulnerability makes their courage more profound. They choose to face the demon not as invincible warriors, but as ailing protectors. Lorraine's role subtly shifts from seer and investigator to caregiver and strategist, her love for Ed guiding her every decision. The warmth of their home, filled with mementos of past battles, now feels like a sanctuary they are desperate to preserve. Their dialogue carries the weight of shared history, with glances and quiet touches speaking volumes about their deep understanding. The decision to return to the field is a mutual, unspoken pact, a recognition that some bonds are worth risking everything for. This final case strips away the professional detachment. They are not consultants, but parents on a rescue mission. The film beautifully showcases how their methodologies adapt to their limitations, relying more on wisdom and cunning than physical endurance. Their faith, always a cornerstone, now feels more personal, a quiet conversation with the divine for protection over their family. The resolution of their arc provides a rare gift in horror, a glimpse of heroes who have survived their war and earned their peace. Their final dance is a testament to a love that has withstood literal hell, a victory more meaningful than any documented case file. This conclusion allows the audience to leave them not in a dark basement, but in the warm light of a celebration, their legacy secure and their hearts, finally, at rest. Judy Warren's character development represents the film's most ambitious thematic undertaking, exploring the burden of inheritance. Her psychic abilities are depicted not as a neat sixth sense, but as an overwhelming sensory overload, a cacophony of impressions from the spiritual world. This portrayal grounds her struggle in a relatable metaphor for grappling with an overwhelming family legacy or extraordinary expectations. Her isolation is palpable. She lives in a world saturated with invisible traumas only she can perceive, making normalcy an impossible dream. Her relationship with Tony Spera offers a glimpse of a life unconnected to the paranormal, a potential anchor in the mundane world she craves. Father Gordon's role is crucial. He represents an alternative spiritual guide outside her parents' shadow, a path of faith not directly tied to demonology. Her defiant trip to Pennsylvania is an act of claiming agency, stepping out of the role of the Warrens' daughter and into the role of a responder in her own right. This journey forces her to confront the source of her fears directly, transforming her from a victim of her gifts into an active user of them. The possession sequence is the ultimate trial, an internal battle where she must find her own voice and will amidst the demon's crushing influence. Her mother's guidance during the climax is not a takeover, but a tutorial, teaching Judy how to channel the torrent into a focused beam of will. This moment of synergy is the film's emotional and philosophical peak, demonstrating that true power is collaborative, not solitary. Judy's acceptance is not a surrender to fate, but an empowered choice to wield her birthright as a tool for good. Her arc concludes with her stepping into a new, integrated identity, ready to face whatever may come, perhaps with Tony by her side. This sets a compelling precedent for a new kind of paranormal protagonist, one shaped by trauma but defined by resilience and hard-won control. The Smurl haunting, while serving a narrative function, is also a deliberate homage to the franchise's roots in documented case studies. The escalation of phenomena follows a textbook pattern: auditory disturbances, moving objects, physical manifestations, and finally, direct attacks on the family's well-being. This procedural authenticity provides a familiar framework upon which the larger, personal drama is built. The grandfather's character adds a layer of poignant guilt. His loving intention becomes the vector for the horror, a reminder that evil often exploits our best impulses. The three distinct entities allow for varied types of scares, from the jump-scare appearance of the axe man to the creeping, eerie presence of the crone. Their coordinated attacks suggest a malignant intelligence directing them, creating a sense of siege upon the household. The Smurl's reactions, fear, confusion, desperation, are portrayed with a raw authenticity that makes their plight emotionally engaging, even as the focus shifts. Their home's architecture and decor, typical of a 1980s Pennsylvania residence, make the invasions feel all the more intrusive and violation of the ordinary. The Warrens' initial investigation of the Smurl case is a return to form, showcasing their practiced teamwork and deductive skills in a new environment. Discovering the truth about the spirits reframes the moral objective from destruction to liberation, adding depth to the exorcism process. The resolution of their haunting is ultimately tied to the larger battle, but it provides a complete mini-narrative of rescue and closure for this innocent family. This subplot ensures the film fulfills its genre obligations while servicing its grander character ambitions. The demonic antagonist's strategy reveals a chilling, long-term intelligence rarely seen in the series. Its failure at Judy's birth created an obsessive fixation, a decades-long plan to correct that perceived defeat. Its manipulation of the mirror's spirits shows a capacity for complex orchestration, using them as both weapons and a shield to obscure its own presence. The corruption of Father Gordon is a key tactical move, eliminating a potential source of aid and demonstrating its ability to attack faith at its core. Its eventual shift from the Smurls to the Warrens' home is a deliberate escalation, moving the conflict to the enemy's heartland. By possessing Judy, it aims to force the Warrens to destroy their own child, the ultimate psychological victory. Its dialogue during the possession, if any, would likely be a twisted amalgam of Judy's fears and its own venom, designed to paralyze her parents with grief and doubt. This entity represents a more personalized evil, one that studies its opponents and attacks their specific emotional vulnerabilities. Its connection to the mirror provides a weakness, but accessing that weakness requires overcoming the very personal crisis it has engineered. Its defeat, therefore, requires a solution beyond traditional rite. It demands a new paradigm of spiritual defense rooted in familial unity. The banishing of this demon feels final because it was defeated not by a recited text, but by the evolved power of the family line it sought to sever. This gives the antagonist a narrative purpose beyond terror. It is the crucible that forges the Warren legacy into its next unbreakable form. The film's technical execution is carefully calibrated to support its dual goals of fright and emotional payoff. Michael Chavez's direction shows a firmer grasp on sustaining dread, using prolonged silence and the careful framing of empty spaces to build unease. The cinematography likely employs a more muted, naturalistic color palette for the 1986 sequences, contrasting with the warmer, perhaps slightly hazy tones of the 1964 prologue. The visual effects for the psychic connection between Lorraine and Judy would need to be innovative, suggesting a merging of auras or visions without resorting to cliché. The sound design becomes a character itself, using the absence of sound, the distortion of familiar noises, and a powerful, emotive score to guide the audience's heart. The production design of the Warren home in this later era would show subtle changes. More photographs of Judy, perhaps Ed's medication on a side table, layering their personal history in the set dressing. The pacing allows the third act to breathe, understanding that the emotional stakes require time to land as powerfully as the scares. The film's editing rhythm might transition from the staccato, jarring cuts of the hauntings to smoother, more flowing transitions during the character-driven moments. The costume design subtly denotes the passage of time and the character's states, from Judy's perhaps more guarded, dark clothing evolving to something lighter by the end. This cohesive technical approach ensures the film feels like a polished, culminating piece of a larger saga, worthy of its finale status. The thematic exploration of legacy is nuanced, acknowledging both its weight and its promise. The film asks whether children are destined to carry the burdens of their parents, and whether those burdens can be transformed into strengths. Judy's journey answers this by showing that legacy is not a predetermined path, but raw material to be shaped by the individual's will. The Warrens' Museum of Artifacts is a literalization of their legacy, a curated collection of contained horrors. Judy's inheritance is the opposite, not contained objects, but a living, breathing sensitivity to the horror itself. The film contrasts the idea of legacy as a static archive with legacy as a living, evolving force. The passing of the torch is therefore not a handing off of a title, but a sharing of a flame, allowing it to grow brighter. This theme resonates beyond the supernatural, speaking to any family dealing with inherited trauma, talent, or responsibility. The finale suggests that a healthy legacy is one that empowers the next generation, not one that enslaves them to the past. Ed and Lorraine's greatest success is not a case file, but raising a daughter who can stand beside them as an equal in the final battle. Their peaceful future is the reward for building a legacy rooted in love and resilience, not just in victory over darkness. This rich thematic layer elevates the film from a simple horror conclusion to a meaningful story about family, responsibility, and growth. The film's place within the broader horror genre is as a mainstream, character-focused epic. It operates within the well-established conventions of the haunted house and demonic possession subgenres, but its commitment to character arcs sets it apart. It demonstrates that in a long-running series, audience investment can be leveraged for deep emotional payoff beyond superficial scares. The film's willingness to provide a happy, definitive ending for its protagonists is a bold choice in a genre often obsessed with bleakness and ambiguity. It argues that catharsis and hope can be as powerful, if not more powerful, than unrelenting despair. The success of this approach at the box office signals an audience appetite for horror stories with heart and conclusive narrative satisfaction. It stands as a counterpoint to more nihilistic or endlessly cyclical horror franchises, offering a model where heroes can actually win and retire. The film's critical reception, split between those valuing emotion and those craving innovation, highlights the ongoing tension in genre filmmaking between familiarity and novelty. Ultimately, Last Rites secures its importance by prioritizing the conclusion of its human story over the perpetuation of its monster mythology, a respectful and resonant choice for the characters and the audience who have followed them for years. The cinematic language of The Conjuring, Last Rites is meticulously crafted to serve its dual purpose as a thrilling horror film and a poignant family drama. Director Michael Chavez employs a visual grammar that distinguishes between the objective horror of the Smurl case and the subjective, internal terror of Judy's journey. The camera work during the hauntings is often stable and observant, framing the horror with a chilling clarity that allows the audience to absorb every dreadful detail. In contrast, scenes focusing on Judy's psychic episodes might utilize more disorienting techniques, swift zooms, distorted lenses, or fragmented editing, to visually represent her sensory overload. The lighting design plays a crucial role, with the warm, practical lamps of the Warren home deliberately contrasting the cold, unnatural glows associated with the mirror's manifestations. This visual distinction subconsciously reinforces the central conflict, the warmth of human connection versus the cold void of demonic malice. The production design for the 1986 period is not overly nostalgic, but feels authentically lived in, grounding the supernatural events in a tangible reality that enhances their believability. The costume design subtly telegraphs character. Ed's clothing might appear slightly looser, hinting at weight loss from his illness, while Judy's style evolves from concealing, dark layers to something more open and assured by the film's conclusion. These are not mere aesthetic choices, but narrative tools that deepen our understanding of the character's inner states without explicit dialogue. The screenplay's structure is deliberately cyclical, mirroring the film's themes of legacy and unresolved history. It begins and ends with the Warren family, bookending the narrative with their most personal triumphs and trials. The prologue is not a disconnected cold open, but the foundational myth of the entire story, the original sin that sets the plot in motion decades later. The transition from 1964 to 1986 is likely seamless, perhaps using a visual match cut from the mirror's surface in the past to its reflection in the present, emphasizing its timeless menace. The intercutting between the Smurl's escalating plight and Judy's increasing distress creates a narrative tension, suggesting a psychic resonance between the haunted family and the sensitive young woman. The midpoint of the film is arguably Judy's decision to travel to Pennsylvania, the moment the personal and professional plots irrevocably collide. The third act's relocation to the Warren homestead is a masterful stroke, raising the stakes by violating the one space the audience has come to see as a sanctuary. The climax's rejection of a traditional, violent exorcism in favor of a collaborative psychic stand is the screenplay's boldest thematic statement. The denouement, featuring the wedding and the vision of the future, is generously paced, allowing the emotional resonance of the ending to fully settle with the audience. This structural integrity ensures that every plot beat, no matter how frightening, ultimately services the characters' emotional arcs and the story's central themes of familial love and closure. The performances by the core cast are the indispensable anchor that makes the film's ambitious emotional goals achievable. Patrick Wilson portrays Ed Warren with a profound weariness that never tips into weakness. His love for his family is the engine that overrides his physical frailty. Vera Farmiga's Lorraine is a magnificent study in layered strength, balancing Sears' resolve, a wife's concern, and a mother's ferocious protectiveness in every glance. Their chemistry remains the series' bedrock, but here it is matured, speaking of a deep, quiet understanding forged in countless fires. Mia Tomlinson, as Judy, has the formidable task of embodying both a victim and a heroine, conveying terror and nascent power with equal conviction. Her scenes with Farmiga are particularly potent, charged with the complex electricity of a mother-daughter relationship strained by extraordinary circumstances. The supporting cast, particularly the actors portraying the besieged Smurl family, provide a crucial foundation of believable terror, their reactions grounding the supernatural events in human fear. The actor portraying Father Gordon must, in limited screen time, establish a figure of genuine faith and compassion, making his subsequent fall a truly tragic beat in the narrative. Even the demonic presence, likely achieved through a combination of performance, voice work, and effects, must project an intelligence and a personalized malice that transcends simple monsterhood. These collective performances ensure that the specters of melodrama or hollow scares are kept at bay, investing every moment with a sincerity that makes the finale's emotions earned and real. The philosophical underpinnings of The Conjuring. Last Rites invite a deeper examination of its portrayal of good and evil. The film presents evil not as a vague, abstract force, but as an intelligent, patient entity that exploits trauma and fractures relationships. It is a corruption that thrives on isolation, aiming to sever the bonds between the Smurls and, ultimately, within the Warren family itself. Good, conversely, is depicted not as a blinding, punitive light, but as a connective power, the active choice to love, to protect, and to unite. The miracle of Judy's birth is the ultimate example, a collective act of faith and love that literally restores life. The film's theology is practical and familial. God's grace is channeled through human connection and selfless action. The demon's defeat via combined psychic will suggest that the human spirit itself, especially when linked in purpose, is a divine instrument. This philosophy rejects the notion of a lone hero battling darkness and instead champions the collective strength of the community, specifically the family unit. It is a hopeful, albeit hard one, worldview that suggests the tools to combat existential darkness are found in our care for one another. This resonates deeply in a modern context, offering a metaphorical framework for battling real-world despair and fragmentation. The film ultimately argues that the most powerful conjuring is not of spirits, but of the courage and love needed to face them together. The film's approach to horror set pieces is consciously reflective of the series' evolution, serving as a curated greatest hits with a personal twist. The Haunting of the Smurl home features sequences that echo the Perron family's ordeals or the Enfield poltergeist's tricks, satisfying fans with a sense of familiar, well-constructed dread. However, these scares are deliberately distanced from the main protagonists initially, allowing the audience to experience them with the Warrens in their professional capacity. The horror shifts qualitatively when it targets Judy. Here, the scares become more psychological and intimate. A jump scare from the crone in a dark hallway is one thing. The violation of Judy's own mind and body is another order of terror entirely. The film understands that the deepest fear lies in the loss of autonomy and the corruption of the self. The climactic possession and suicide attempt is the apotheosis of this, a set piece that horrifies not through external ghouls, but through the tragic spectacle of a loved one turned against herself. This progression ensures the film's horror matures alongside its characters, moving from external, case study frights to internal, character-driven terror. It is a strategy that rewards long-term viewers, making the final act's stakes feel uniquely personal and devastating because we have seen the entire journey that led to this point. The score and soundscape of Last Rites function as an essential narrative layer, guiding emotional response and deepening thematic resonance. A returning composer would wisely weave motifs from the earlier films, perhaps the simple, haunting piano theme associated with the Warrens, into a more complex, emotionally varied tapestry. The music for the 1964 prologue might carry a melancholic, period-appropriate tone, while the 1986 scenes could incorporate subtle synthesizer textures to anchor the era. The horror sequences would likely employ dissonant, atonal strings and deep, rumbling sub-bass to create a physical sense of unease. The true innovation would come in scoring the psychic connection between Lorraine and Judy. Here, the music might transform, merging their individual themes into a singular, powerful crescendo of harmony and resolve. Sound design would be paramount in selling the reality of the hauntings. The specific groan of floorboards, the unsettling whisper just below comprehension, the stark silence before a sudden attack. In Judy's psychic visions, diegetic sound might drop out, replaced by a muffled cacophony of overlapping voices and eerie sensations. The final confrontation's sound would likely strip down to almost nothing, emphasizing the internal spiritual struggle, before erupting in a cathartic, sonic release as the mirror shatters. This meticulous oral design would not merely accentuate scares, but would actively participate in telling the story of legacy, connection, and triumph. The marketing and cultural positioning of The Conjuring, Last Rites as a finale, created a unique set of expectations and responsibilities. Promotional materials would undoubtedly emphasize the emotional conclusion, likely using imagery of the Warren family together, perhaps intercut with glimpses of the mirror's terror. This framing primes the audience to expect a payoff centered on character, rather than merely an escalation of frights. The box office success suggests this approach connected powerfully, drawing audiences for a farewell event rather than just another sequel. The discourse surrounding the film thus naturally splits between evaluating its merits as a horror film and its success as a series conclusion, two related but distinct criteria. This positions the film within a broader trend of legacy sequels and franchise finales that seek to provide generational closure. Its performance proves the commercial viability of ending a major franchise on a definitive note, a lesson for an industry often afraid to conclude profitable stories. The film's legacy will therefore be dual, as the concluding chapter of the Warren saga and as a case study in how to leverage audience investment for emotional, rather than merely sensational, payoff. In a metatextual sense, The Conjuring, Last Rites is also about the responsibility and burden of storytelling itself. Ed and Lorraine Warren were real people who dedicated their lives to documenting and combating what they believed to be supernatural evil. The entire film franchise is an extrapolation of their case files, a fictionalization of their legacy. This film, by focusing on their retirement and their daughter's inheritance, directly engages with the idea of who gets to control a narrative. Judy represents the next generation, who must decide whether to perpetuate her parents' story, challenge it, or forge her own path. The film chooses a path of respectful succession, suggesting that stories, like gifts and curses, are passed down and must be adapted by those who receive them. The final shot of the Warrens, content and at peace, is the franchise's final statement on its own subjects. It lets them rest, having honored their struggle and provided them with a fictional piece their real-life counterparts may never have claimed. This adds a layer of poignant respect to the project, framing it not as exploitation, but as a dramatic eulogy for two figures who have entered the pop culture pantheon. Ultimately, The Conjuring, Last Rites achieves a difficult harmony, balancing the demands of its genre with the obligations of a serialized character drama. It provides the chilling sequences and gothic atmosphere that are the franchise's trademarks, ensuring it delivers on its core horror promise. Yet, its true ambition lies in using that genre framework to explore universally resonant themes of family, sacrifice, legacy, and love. The film argues that the greatest battles are not fought in haunted basements but within the human heart, and that the most powerful exorcism is the banishment of doubt and fear through unity. It concludes the Warrens' journey not with a cliffhanger or a cynical twist, but with a hard-earned vision of sunrise after a long night. This emotional honesty and commitment to character closure is what will cement its place, not necessarily as the scariest Conjuring film, but perhaps as the most profoundly satisfying for those who invested in the hearts and souls at its center. It stands as a testament to the idea that in a world of shadows, the light we kindle for each other is the only one that truly matters. The film's opening prologue establishes its thematic preoccupation with cycles and the profound consequences of intervention. Lorraine's investigation in 1964 is not a random assignment, but a deliberate choice that irrevocably alters her family's destiny. The curio shop setting, filled with objects steeped in unknown histories, serves as a microcosm of the Warrens' entire world, a place where the past is never truly inert. The demon's attack, triggering premature labor, is a brutal metaphor for how evil seeks to corrupt and destroy new life at its very inception. The stillborn delivery plunges the audience into a moment of raw, human despair that is far removed from supernatural fright. The subsequent revival through prayer is presented not as a magical cure, but as a profound, faith-based defiance of a seemingly final outcome. This miracle immediately establishes Judy as a singular being, a child literally reclaimed from the grasp of a malicious entity. The prologue's tone is one of urgent, intimate horror, contrasting with the more methodical, investigative horror of the main narrative. It functions as the foundational trauma for all three Warrens, a secret origin story that haunts their quietest moments. This narrative choice deepens the entire franchise retroactively, adding a layer of poignant personal stakes to their life's work. The Mirror's malevolence is thus established as both ancient and personally vindictive, a foe with a long memory and a specific grudge. By anchoring the entire film in this pivotal, private moment, the story ensures its climax will feel like the closing of a spiritual loop decades in the making. The character of Judy Warren is meticulously constructed to explore the psychological toll of a life touched by the paranormal. Her psychic abilities are framed not as a cool superpower, but as a debilitating condition, akin to a constant, overwhelming migraine of the soul. She likely experiences not just visions but empathic echoes, feeling the residual terror and pain imprinted on locations and objects. This constant barrage would make trust and normal social interaction immensely difficult, fostering a deep-seated isolation. Her relationship with Tony Spera represents a tangible connection to the ordinary world she fears is forever closed to her. His character must serve as the audience's anchor to normalcy, reacting with believable concern and confusion rather than instant acceptance. Judy's decision to seek counsel from Father Gordon, rather than her parents, is a critical character beat illustrating her desire for a spiritual path distinct from their combative demonology. Her journey to the Smurl home alone is an act of tremendous bravery, a step into the very heart of the darkness she has spent her life fearing. This proactive choice redefines her from a passive victim of her inheritance into an active, if untrained, agent. The film wisely avoids making her instantly proficient. Her initial attempts to help the Smurls may backfire or intensify the haunting, showcasing her raw, uncontrolled power. Her ultimate possession is the culmination of this vulnerability, the demon targeting her precisely because her abilities make her a potent but unstable conduit. Her triumph, therefore, is not just over the demon but over her own fractured self-perception, integrating the disparate parts of her identity into a cohesive whole. This arc transforms her from a legacy character into a fully realized protagonist in her own right. The Smurl family narrative, while a catalyst, is treated with a respect that prevents it from feeling like mere plot device. Their home is portrayed as a typical, aspirational space, a symbol of the American dream that becomes a prison. The haunting escalates in a classically effective manner, beginning with subtle, deniable phenomena that slowly erode their sense of reality and safety. The grandfather's guilt is a powerful emotional undercurrent, his good intentions poisoning the well of family life, a tragedy anyone can empathize with. The three distinct entities allow for a varied haunting portfolio. The crone might specialize in whispered threats and invasive closeness, the younger woman in manifestations of sorrow that curdle into rage, and the axeman in sudden, brutal assaults on the home's structural integrity. The family's dynamic is tested under this siege, their love and patience strained by fear and sleep deprivation, making them a realistic portrait of a unit under extreme stress. The Warrens' entry into their case brings not instant relief, but a complex process of validation, investigation, and terrifying confrontation. The Smurl's perspective provides the audience with a grounded entry point into the supernatural chaos before the story narrows its focus to the Warrens' personal crisis. Their ultimate liberation, tied to the destruction of the mirror, offers a complete, satisfying narrative thread for this subplot. This ensures the film operates as a fully functional haunted house story, even as it transcends the genre for its character-driven finale. Director Michael Chavez utilizes a distinct visual palette to delineate the film's emotional and temporal spaces. The 1964 sequences might be bathed in a warmer, almost sepia-like light, tinged with the nostalgia of memory and the ominous shadow of impending tragedy. The 1986 scenes, particularly within the Smurl household, could employ a cooler, more sterile color grade, emphasizing the emotional chill and displacement the family experiences. The Warren home, by contrast, is a sanctuary of warm tones, rich browns, deep reds, and soft golds from practical lamps, creating a visual representation of safety and history. When the demon invades this space, these warm tones would be visibly corrupted, swallowed by deep blues and harsh, unnatural shadows. Chavez's camera movement is likely deliberate. Steady, unsettling glides during moments of investigation and frantic, shaky intensity during attacks or Judy's visions. The composition often frames characters in ways that suggest entrapment, through doorways in mirrors or dwarfed by oppressive architecture, visually reinforcing their psychological states. The use of focus becomes a storytelling tool, with backgrounds blurring during intimate character moments and sharpening terrifyingly to reveal a lurking figure. The destruction of the mirror would be a cathartic explosion of visual release, perhaps with light fracturing in a way that reverses the earlier motifs of capture and reflection. This thoughtful visual strategy ensures the film's aesthetic is actively contributing to its narrative and emotional goals. The theological framework of the film is practical, familial, and deeply rooted in Catholic iconography without being doctrinaire. Faith is presented less as a rigid set of rules and more as a lived, breathing practice of love, protection, and community. The rituals, prayer, holy water, appeals to divine authority, are tools, but their efficacy is shown to be amplified by the sincerity and unity of those wielding them. The demon's ability to drive a priest to suicide is a stark acknowledgement that faith alone, if isolated, can be vulnerable. It requires the support of a community, a family. The climax's solution, a combined psychic and spiritual effort, synthesizes Lorraine's clairvoyance, Judy's inherited sensitivity, and their shared faith into a new form of spiritual warfare. This suggests a theology that is adaptive and inclusive, where personal gifts can be consecrated to a higher purpose. The film avoids portraying God as a deus ex machina. Instead, divine power is channeled through human courage, love, and self-sacrifice. The miracle of Judy's birth and their final victory are both products of desperate, selfless love acting in concert with a higher grace. This makes the spiritual conflict emotionally resonant rather than abstract, positioning the family unit itself as a sacred entity worth defending. The film's theology is ultimately hopeful, asserting that the light nurtured in our connections is stronger than any external darkness. The sound design and musical score operate in meticulous concert to build dread and articulate inner turmoil. The ambient soundscape of the Smurl house would gradually transform, with familiar domestic noises becoming distorted or layered with faint, unsettling whispers. The mirror itself might emit a subaudible hum or a faint, discordant ringing when active, a sonic cue to its malignant state. Judy's psychic episodes would be accompanied by a dense, overlapping audio collage of fragmented voices, echoes of past traumas, and emotional static, sonically representing her overload. Composer Joseph Bashara, if returning, would likely evolve his iconic, string-heavy themes to incorporate more elegiac and harmonious motifs for the family moments. The demon's presence could be signaled by our inversion or corruption of these familial themes, twisting them into dissonant variations. The silence in the film is as potent as the sound, used strategically to heighten tension before a scare or to focus on a character's terrified breathing. The final confrontation might strip the audio down to a bare minimum, whispered prayers, ragged breaths, and the tense creak of the house, making the eventual shattering of the mirror a tremendously cathartic sonic event. This layered oral approach does more than scare. It psychologically immerses the audience in the subjective experiences of both the haunted and the hauntee. The film's approach to legacy is refreshingly nuanced, acknowledging its weight while celebrating its potential. Ed and Lorraine's legacy is not presented as a flawless edifice, but as a life's work built on sacrifice, trauma, and hard-won knowledge. Judy inherits both the burden of their enemies and the tools of their trade, a double-edged bequest. The film explores the anxiety of living up to legendary parents while being plagued by the very forces they famously battled. The passing of the torch is not a ceremonious handoff, but a messy, dangerous process of trial by fire. Judy must ultimately redefine this legacy on her own terms, integrating it with her own identity and her relationship with Tony. The final scenes suggest a future where the Warren legacy evolves, perhaps becoming less about public-facing investigation and more about a quiet, ongoing vigilance. This allows the characters their peace while acknowledging that the work, in some form, continues. The film posits that a healthy legacy is not a cage but a foundation upon which the next generation can build something new and personally meaningful. The marketing and cultural conversation around Last Rites positioned it as a cinematic event, the culmination of a 12-year saga. Trailers would have balanced iconic, frightening imagery with poignant shots of the Warrens together, emphasizing the farewell aspect. This framing successfully attracted both horror fans and those invested in the character's journey, contributing to its box office triumph. The discussion it sparked about franchise endings in Hollywood is significant, proving that audiences will reward a conclusive, emotionally satisfying finale. The film's reception highlights a divide between critics evaluating it as a standalone horror film and fans appreciating it as a series capstone, a tension inherent in any long-running narrative's conclusion. Its success ensures that the Conjuring universe will continue, but with the core story respectfully concluded, allowing spin-offs to explore without overshadowing the original heroes. In its final moments, The Conjuring. Last Rites transcends its genre to become a moving drama about endings and new beginnings. The wedding scene is devoid of supernatural threat, a pure celebration of life, love, and continuity. Lorraine's vision of their future as grandparents is a gift to the audience, a guarantee of the peaceful retirement these characters have earned. The final shot, perhaps of Ed and Lorraine's hands clasped or their contented smiles, lingers on the human connection rather than any lingering ghost. It is a definitive, warm, and emotionally generous ending that prioritizes character resolution over sequel bait. This choice cements the film's place as the heartfelt finale to a story about two people whose love for each other was the most powerful force in a world full of demons. It reminds us that the most compelling exorcism is the one that banishes despair and champions hope, leaving the audience not with a scream, but with a sigh of profound, hard-earned contentment. The psychological depth of the characters is explored through their individual relationships with fear and duty. Ed Warren's physical vulnerability becomes a new frontier of terror for him, a battle he cannot fight with crucifixes or recorded evidence. His fear of leaving Lorraine and Judy unprotected is a more profound horror than any specter he has previously encountered. This shifts his role from active protector to strategic guide, relying on his decades of knowledge to direct the battle from a position of enforced restraint. Lorraine's fear is multifaceted, encompassing the potential loss of both her husband and her daughter, a dual threat that tests the very core of her faith. Her clairvoyance, once a tool for investigation, becomes a source of anticipatory dread as she likely glimpses fragments of the coming catastrophe. Judy's entire existence has been subconsciously shaped by a fear she could not name, the lingering echo of the demon's first failed attack. Her struggle is to differentiate her own identity from this inherited trauma, to claim her abilities as her own and not merely as scars from a prenatal battle. The Smurl family's fear is portrayed as a corrosive, domestic force that erodes trust and love within their home, turning familiar spaces into landscapes of threat. The film suggests that confronting these personalized, intimate fears is a more harrowing journey than facing a generic monster. Each character's arc is therefore a map of their confrontation with a specific manifestation of dread, making their ultimate courage individually significant and deeply earned. The film's use of domestic space as a battleground is a masterful escalation of the franchise's core tension. The Warren home is not just a house, but a curated museum of their life's work and their family memories, a physical manifestation of their legacy. Its invasion is therefore a violation of their history, their safety, and their very identity. The demon's strategy of moving the conflict to their home is a brilliant tactical move, forcing them to fight on terrain saturated with personal meaning and emotional vulnerability. Familiar objects, a family photograph, a favorite chair, Judy's childhood room, become potential vectors for terror or sites of psychological warfare. This forces the Warrens to defend not just their lives, but the sanctity of their entire shared history. The Smurl home, by contrast, represents a generic domestic ideal, a blank slate upon which the haunting writes its destructive script. The violation of their space is tragic, but it lacks the layered personal history that makes the invasion of the Warren home feel like a profound desecration. This contrast highlights the film's central theme. The deeper the personal connection to a space, the more devastating its corruption. The final act's location shift ensures the climax is not about reclaiming a house, but about reclaiming a home, a heart, and a future. The demonic entity's methodology reveals a sophisticated understanding of human psychology, moving beyond mere shock tactics to strategic corruption. Its initial attack in 1964 was a direct, physical assault on life itself. Its subsequent strategy, however, is one of indirect manipulation and psychological torture. By using the trapped spirits as proxies, it obscures its own presence, wasting the investigator's energy on secondary threats. Its corruption of Father Gordon is a deliberate strike at a symbol of institutional faith and an external support system for Judy. The shift to possessing Judy is the culmination of this strategy, aiming to use the Warrens' greatest love as the instrument of their ultimate despair. The entity speaks through Judy not with grandiose threats, but likely with her own voice twisted by despair, vocalizing her deepest insecurities and fears to break her parents' will. This approach shows an evil that studies its prey, that exploits emotional vulnerabilities rather than just physical ones. Its goal is not just to kill, but to corrupt, to make its victims participate in their own destruction and the destruction of what they love most. This makes it a more intellectually formidable and terrifying antagonist, as it cannot be defeated by ritual alone, but requires a spiritual and psychological counter-strategy. Its defeat via unified familial love is therefore a direct rebuttal of its entire corruptive philosophy. The cinematography's approach to the supernatural manifestations deliberately evolves from the earlier film's playbook. While James Wan often utilized wide, chilling frames and long, unbroken takes to build dread, Last Rites might employ more disorienting, subjective camera work to reflect Judy's unstable perspective. The entities themselves could be depicted with a blend of practical effects and subtle digital enhancement, prioritizing a tangible, weighty presence over purely CGI spectacle. Their movement might be unnervingly deliberate, a contrast to the frantic terror of their victims. The film could use reflections not just in the central mirror, but in windows, picture glass, and even the eyes of the characters to suggest the pervasive, watching presence of the other side. Light and shadow are employed not just for mood, but as active narrative elements. The demon's influence might be shown literally snuffing out light sources or casting impossible, moving shadows. During the psychic link between Lorraine and Judy, the visual language could shift entirely, perhaps to a stark, high-contrast monochrome or a flooded, overexposed aura representing their merged consciousness. The destruction of the mirror would be filmed for maximum cathartic impact, with slow-motion fragments capturing not just breaking glass, but the release of trapped light and energy. This thoughtful visual evolution ensures the film feels both familiar and appropriately climactic in its presentation of the unreal. The screenplay's dialogue serves to underscore character relationships and thematic weight rather than merely exposition. Conversations between Ed and Lorraine are likely peppered with shorthand references to past cases, illustrating the deep, unspoken understanding of a long-married couple who have shared extraordinary experiences. Their lines to each other are laced with protective concern and a weary humor that acknowledges their shared burden. Judy's dialogue with her parents probably carries a mix of affection, frustration, and a desperate desire for normalcy that they cannot provide. Her exchanges with Tony Spera offer a glimpse of a more conventional relationship, his dialogue serving to ground her in the everyday world. The demon's dialogue, when it speaks through Judy, would be the most carefully crafted, designed to sound like Judy's own thoughts turned against her and her family, using intimate knowledge as a weapon. The priests and other authority figures speak with a ritualistic formality that contrasts with the Warrens' more practical, experienced approach to spiritual crisis. This careful attention to vocal character ensures that the human drama remains compelling even when the plot mechanics of the haunting are in motion. The film understands that in a finale, what the characters say to each other in quiet moments carries as much weight as any incantation. The film's editing rhythm is crucial in managing its tone, balancing slow-burn tension with explosive frights and emotional pauses. The prologue is likely tightly cut, moving with a sense of inevitable tragedy towards its climactic moment of despair and miracle. The establishment of the Smurl haunting might use a more deliberate, accumulating pace, allowing small horrors to stack upon each other to create a sense of inescapable siege. Scenes of the Warrens in retirement would be edited with a softer, more languid rhythm, emphasizing their hard-won peace. As Judy becomes involved and the danger personalizes, the editing likely becomes more jarring and fragmented, mirroring her psychic disorientation and the breaking down of barriers between the personal and professional plots. The cross-cutting between the Smurl's final crisis and Judy's journey to Pennsylvania would create a propulsive narrative momentum. The final confrontation in the Warren home might use longer takes interspersed with rapid, disorienting cuts during the possession struggle, visually externalizing the internal battle. The transition from the climax to the wedding epilogue would be marked by a definitive shift to smooth, flowing edits, visually representing the return to peace and stability. This editorial mastery ensures the audience is guided through a complex emotional journey without losing the through line of suspense or heart. The potential future of the franchise, as hinted by the film's conclusion, is one of evolution rather than repetition. A series focusing on Judy and Tony would necessitate a different tone, perhaps more investigative and psychic in nature, less reliant on the classic haunted house template that defined her parents' era. Judy's sensitivity could open doors to new types of stories. Cold cases involving psychic impressions, hauntings tied to emotional residues rather than demons, or even preventative work stopping hauntings before they fully manifest. Tony's role as a grounded, non-psychic partner would provide a crucial audience surrogate and a source of procedural logic. This new dynamic could explore a modern relationship tested by the extraordinary, a contrast to Ed and Lorraine's established partnership forged in a different time. The occult museum, now under Judy's care, remains an endless source of story prompts, but she might approach it more as an archivist and neutralizer than a collector. This direction would honor the past while boldly stepping into a new narrative paradigm, ensuring the Conjuring universe does not become a stagnant relic, but a living, evolving mythos. The finale of Last Rites thus functions as both a graceful conclusion and a thoughtful prologue for what could come next. The cultural impact of The Conjuring. Last Rites lies in its demonstration that mainstream horror can prioritize emotional catharsis and character closure. In an era of cinematic universes often criticized for endless, directionless expansion, this film chose a definitive endpoint for its core narrative. It respected the audience's investment by providing a conclusion that felt both emotionally satisfying and true to the characters' journeys. The commercial success of this approach sends a clear message that audiences value resolution and will reward stories that have the courage to end. The film also reinforces the potency of the based-on-real case files conceit, even in a largely fictionalized story, by grounding its emotional beats in a semblance of historical reality. It stands as a significant entry in the modern horror canon, not for reinventing the wheel, but for perfecting the emotional machinery within a well-established framework. Its legacy will be that of a finale that understood its primary duty was to its characters, proving that the most satisfying chill is often followed by the warmth of a story well and truly concluded. The score's emotional journey is designed to mirror the arc from dread to deliverance. Early themes associated with the mirror are likely atonal and metallic, using glassy percussion and discordant strings to create a sense of unnatural stillness and reflection. The Warren family theme, established in earlier films, would be reintroduced in a more subdued, aged variation, carrying the weight of years and memory. Judy's theme might be a searching, melancholic melody for solo violin or piano, often interrupted by bursts of chaotic, atonal texture representing her psychic intrusions. As the film progresses and the threat becomes personal, these themes would begin to clash and intertwine musically. The possession scene could be underscored by a brutal inversion of Judy's theme, corrupted by the demon's musical motifs. The turning point arrives when Lorraine and Judy join forces. Here, their individual themes would merge, not into a simple harmony, but into a powerful new musical statement, a theme of legacy and combined strength. This new theme would then swell to dominate the score during the mirror's destruction, a triumphant, resonant resolution of the film's musical tensions. The epilogue would feature this legacy theme in its purest, most peaceful form, perhaps played on a gentle piano or a full, warm string section, providing the final, emotional release for the audience. This musical narrative ensures the film's heart is felt as keenly as its scares. Ultimately, The Conjuring, Last Rites succeeds by remembering that the most powerful connections are human ones. It uses the apparatus of demonology and haunting to explore universal questions about family, sacrifice, and what we leave behind. The film posits that our true legacy is not in the artifacts we collect or the battles we win, but in the strength and love we instill in the next generation. It allows its heroes to retire not as battered warriors, but as fulfilled individuals who have protected their world and can now enjoy the peace they fought for. The final image is not of a closed case file, but of an open future, bathed in light and love. This emotional honesty is its greatest triumph, transforming a genre exercise into a poignant farewell. It reminds viewers that after the lights come up, the stories that linger are not those of the monsters, but of the people who faced them together and found their way home. The film's prologue establishes a profound thematic link between creation and corruption, where the genesis of a life is nearly usurped by a force of absolute negation. Lorraine's investigation during her pregnancy is a powerful statement about her character, a refusal to let maternal vulnerability eclipse her vocational duty. The curio shop itself is a labyrinth of dormant histories, each object a silent vessel for potential energy, both benevolent and malign. The demon's assault is uniquely intimate, targeting not just the body but the very process of generation, making its malice feel profoundly personal and violating. The subsequent stillness in the delivery room is a vacuum of hope, a moment where faith seems utterly insufficient against biological fact. The desperate, unified prayer of Ed and Lorraine operates as an act of spiritual defiance, a raw channeling of will and love that challenges a predetermined outcome. Judy's first breath is therefore a dual victory, a medical miracle and a spiritual triumph, marking her as a soul forever marked by this celestial tug-of-war. This origin story reframes every subsequent event in the film not as random hauntings, but as chapters in a protracted spiritual war with deeply personal stakes. The mirror, in this light, is less a haunted object and more a strategic weapon in this war, its malice patient and specifically aimed. This foundational trauma becomes the emotional and narrative gravity well for the entire plot, ensuring every scare and sacrifice feels part of a cohesive, inevitable reckoning. Judy Warren's internal landscape is portrayed as a battleground long before any external haunting begins. Her psychic sensitivity is less a sixth sense and more a permeable boundary, leaving her emotionally and psychologically vulnerable to the spiritual echoes that surround her. This constant low-grade exposure has likely shaped her personality, fostering a defensive introspection and a deep-seated yearning for the mundane. Her relationship with Tony Spera is crucial as it represents a potential anchor in a world of shifting spiritual sands, a connection untethered from her parents' overwhelming legacy. Her consultations with Father Gordon reveal a search for a framework to understand her gifts outside the context of demonology, a desire for pastoral care rather than tactical training. Her decision to travel to the Smurls is the moment this internal conflict externalizes. It is an act of both immense courage and potential recklessness, driven by a need to test her abilities and perhaps exorcise her own demons. The film wisely avoids making her instantly competent. Her initial foray into the haunting likely amplifies the crisis, showcasing power without control. This failure is essential, as it makes her subsequent possession a tragic but logical culmination of her untamed potential being hijacked. Her ultimate victory is therefore not just over the external demon, but over the internalized fear and shame attached to her own identity. By embracing her abilities in concert with her mother, she integrates the fractured parts of herself, transforming a lifelong curse into a managed, powerful inheritance. This arc is the film's true emotional spine, tracing a journey from afflicted heir to sovereign wielder of a difficult legacy. The Smurl family serves as a tragic counterpoint and a narrative catalyst, their normalcy making their violation all the more effective. Their home is the epitome of unremarkable American suburbia, a deliberate choice to make the invasion of the supernatural feel like a violation of a universal safe space. The hauntings progression is a textbook study in escalating terror, designed to systematically dismantle their sense of security, logic, and finally, their familial bonds. The grandfather's role is a masterstroke of tragic irony, his gesture of love becoming the vector for absolute horror, a reminder that evil often arrives through the most benign channels. The three distinct entities provide a portfolio of fear. The crone represents invasive, personal malice. The younger woman embodies a sorrow so deep it becomes a tangible, chilling presence. The Axeman introduces a threat of immediate, brutal physical destruction. Their haunting is not random, but feels like a coordinated siege, a calculated dismantling of domestic peace. The Warrens' intervention is initially professional, a return to the methodologies that define their careers. The discovery that these spirits are victims reframes the moral imperative from banishment to liberation, adding a layer of poignant complexity to the exorcism. Their story, while ultimately secondary to the Warrens' personal saga, is given enough weight to ensure it feels like a complete and harrowing narrative in its own right. This respect for the case of the week ensures the film satisfies the foundational pleasures of the franchise even as it builds towards its unique, character-driven climax. Director Michael Chavez employs a visual language that expertly delineates between observation and experience. The scenes of investigation are likely framed with a composed, almost clinical precision, allowing the audience to scan the frame for clues and anomalies alongside the Warrens. In contrast, the sequences depicting Judy's psychic episodes or the Smurl's terror might utilize shaky, handheld camera work or disorienting Dutch angles, thrusting the viewer into the subjective experience of fear. The use of depth of field becomes a narrative tool. A shallow focus might isolate a character in their fear, while a deep focus could reveal a lurking threat in the background, visible to the audience but not the character. The color grading likely undergoes a subtle transformation, with the warm, amber tones of safety gradually being leached away as the demon's influence grows, replaced by desaturated blues and harsh, clinical whites. The mirror's presence in a scene might be consistently emphasized through composition, always sitting ominously in frame, a silent participant in the unfolding drama. The climax's psychic union between mother and daughter would demand a unique visual signature, perhaps a superimposition of their faces, or a shared point of view that sees both the physical world and the spiritual storm simultaneously. The destruction of the mirror needs to be a cathartic visual release, with light and shadow playing in ways that reverse the earlier motifs of entrapment and reflection. This meticulous visual strategy ensures the film's aesthetic is not merely decorative, but is an active, eloquent participant in the storytelling. The film's theological perspective is resolutely practical and communal, focusing on faith as enacted love rather than abstract dogma. The tools of the Church, holy water, crucifixes, prayers of exorcism, are presented as effective but not magical. Their power is shown to be amplified by the faith, conviction, and moral authority of the user. The demon's ability to corrupt a priest is a sobering reminder that faith, when isolated and under extreme assault, can be fractured. It is strongest when part of a community of believers. The Warrens' approach has always been a hybrid of Catholic rite and psychic intuition, and this film pushes that synthesis to its logical conclusion. The final victory is achieved not by a priest reciting Latin, but by a family uniting their unique gifts, Lorraine's sight, Judy's sensitivity, Ed's steadfast faith, into a concerted spiritual force. This suggests a divinity that works through human connection and courage, a God whose power is channeled through selfless love and the defense of the innocent. The miracle of Judy's birth and their final triumph are two halves of the same coin. Divine grace responding to desperate, unified human love. This theology is inherently hopeful and empowering, positioning the family itself as a sacred unit, a living church capable of withstanding the tides of darkness. It moves beyond ritualistic horror into the realm of spiritual affirmation, a rarity in mainstream supernatural filmmaking. The auditory landscape of the film is designed to be a character in itself, shaping perception and emotional response. The sound design for The Haunting would likely prioritize the subversion of domestic sounds. The creak of a floorboard becomes a groan, the hum of a refrigerator morphs into a dissonant drone. A child's whisper is distorted into something ancient and cruel. The mirror might have its own sonic signature, a faint, high-frequency ring or a low, subaudible pressure that subconsciously unsettles the viewer. Judy's psychic episodes would be oral nightmares, a dense overlay of whispered fragments, emotional echoes, and temporal distortions, sonically illustrating her fractured perception of reality. Composer Joseph Bishara's score would need to evolve from pure dissonance to incorporate themes of legacy and connection, perhaps using a solo cello or a human voice to represent Judy's lonely struggle before introducing warmer, orchestral harmonies for the familial bond. The demon's influence could be sonically represented by the inversion or corruption of these familial motifs, twisting them into minor key atrocities. Strategic silence is used as a weapon, creating vacuums of dread that make the subsequent sonic jump scare all the more effective. The final confrontation might strip away the score almost entirely, leaving only diegetic sound, ragged breathing, whispered prayers, the strain of rope, making the spiritual battle feel immediate, intimate, and terrifyingly real. The shattering of the mirror would then be a tremendous, layered cacophony of breaking glass, released energy, and a final, resolving chord from the score, providing audible catharsis. The concept of legacy in the film is treated with remarkable complexity, acknowledging it as both a burden and a birthright, a source of strength and a prison. Ed and Lorraine's legacy is a public narrative of bravery and expertise, but privately, it is a life of trauma, sacrifice, and constant vigilance that they have reluctantly passed to their daughter. Judy's struggle is to differentiate between the legacy as a set of expectations and the legacy as a set of tools she can adapt for her own life and purpose. The passing of the torch is not a ceremonial event but a traumatic ordeal, a trial by fire where Judy must nearly be consumed by the very darkness she is meant to combat. Her ultimate acceptance is not a submission to her parents' path, but an integration of their knowledge with her own unique sensitivity, forging a new identity. The film suggests that a healthy relationship with legacy involves both reverence and reinterpretation. One must honor the past without being enslaved by it. The final scenes promise a future where the Warren legacy evolves through Judy, potentially becoming less about public-facing battles and more about quiet, psychic stewardship. This allows the original heroes their hard-earned peace, while affirming that the work of light against darkness is a continuous, generational endeavor. It is a mature and hopeful perspective on how we carry the past into the future. The film's place within the broader Conjuring universe is that of a keystone, providing structural closure to the central narrative arch while leaving the wider world intact. Its commercial success as a finale proves the viability of concluding a major franchise with emotional sincerity rather than a cynical cliffhanger. The cultural conversation it sparked likely centered on the rarity of such definitive endings in modern franchise filmmaking, positioning it as a respectful alternative to endless serialization. Its reception highlighted the different criteria used by critics evaluating a horror film's craft and fans evaluating a series' conclusion's emotional payoff. This dichotomy itself is a testament to the film's dual identity. By concluding the Warren story, it effectively canonizes their journey, allowing the spin-offs like Annabelle and The Nun to exist as folktales within this established mythological framework. The film ensures that any future entries will be measured against the completed, emotional arc of the original protagonists, raising the stakes for subsequent storytelling. Its legacy within the horror genre will be as a film that demonstrated mainstream audiences crave catharsis and closure, that they will reward a story that has the courage to end, and that the most powerful specters are often the ones we conjure from our own fears and loves. In its meticulous construction and emotional resolve, The Conjuring, Last Rites achieves a resonant harmony between genre obligation and character-driven drama. It delivers the meticulously crafted scares and gothic atmosphere that are the franchise's signature, honoring its contractual agreement with the audience. Yet, its true ambition and success lie in leveraging that framework to explore the enduring themes of familial sacrifice, the weight of inheritance, and the redemptive power of unified love. The film argues that the most significant battles are not against external monstrosities, but for the preservation of the human spirit and the bonds that define it. It provides its beloved protagonists not with a Pyrrhic victory or an ambiguous ending, but with a vision of sunrise after the longest night. This emotional honesty and commitment to definitive closure is what will cement its place, not as the most terrifying Conjuring film, but perhaps as the most profoundly human and satisfying for those who invested in the hearts at its core. It stands as a final testament to the idea that in a world haunted by shadows, the light we kindle together is the only one that truly, permanently, banishes the dark. The film's narrative architecture is built upon a foundation of cyclical violence and interrupted fate. The prologue's events establish a cosmic debt, an unresolved conflict between a specific demonic force and the Warren family's will. This debt hangs over the subsequent decades, a spiritual interest accruing in the form of Judy's growing psychic torment. The 1964 attack is not merely an assault on Lorraine, but a corruption of a sacred threshold, the space between life and death during childbirth. The demon's goal is to pervert the act of creation itself, to snuff out a life at the precise moment it enters the world. Its failure is monumental, as the Warrens' faith catalyzes a counter-miracle, reclaiming Judy from the void. This act of reclamation marks Judy as a living testament to a power that the demon could not overcome, making her both a trophy and a permanent reminder of its defeat. The intervening years become a period of dormancy but not inactivity, as the entity regroups and plots a more intricate revenge. The cursed mirror serves as its long-term agent, a sleeper cell of malevolence waiting for the perfect moment to reactivate the conflict. The Smurl family are tragic pawns in this larger game, their suffering a means to an end, the end being the drawing out of Judy Warren. This structure elevates the plot from a simple haunting to a generational saga of spiritual warfare, where every action has a consequence that echoes across years. Judy Warren's psychological portrait is one of a person burdened by a consciousness too vast and unguarded. Her abilities likely manifest as a form of hyper-empathy, where she feels the emotional residues of tragedies long past as if they were fresh wounds. This constant psychic static would make constructing a stable, coherent sense of self an extraordinary challenge. Her world is not just the physical present, but a layered palimpsest of historical pain and spectral echoes, from which she cannot shield herself. Tony Spera represents a lifeline to simplicity, a person whose reality is singular and unhaunted, offering a glimpse of the normal life she desperately craves, but fears is unattainable. Her consultations with Father Gordon are attempts to sanctify her confusion, to seek absolution for a sin she did not commit, the sin of being a permeable vessel in a world of solid walls. Her journey to the Smurls is a pivotal act of self-definition, an attempt to use her curse as a tool for good, to transform passive suffering into active agency. This decision, however heroic, is also naive, as she lacks the training and emotional fortitude her parents spent a lifetime building. The subsequent possession is the ultimate violation, a hostile takeover of her already fragile psyche by the very entity that has sought her since before her birth. Her victory, therefore, is a reclamation of sovereignty, an integration of her fractured self into a purposeful whole under her own command. By the end, she does not cure her sensitivity but masters it, learning to modulate the channel rather than having it perpetually forced open. This journey from victim to sovereign is the film's most potent and transformative character arc, offering a powerful metaphor for mastering one's inherited traumas. The Smurl haunting operates with a cruel, systematic logic that dismantles the family's reality layer by layer. The initial phenomena are plausibly deniable: misplaced keys, faint odors, distant sounds, eroding their trust in their own perception. The escalation to physical manifestations, the apparitions, the moving objects, the axe blows, shifts the attack from the psychological to the corporeal, making their home a literal prison of fear. The three entities function as a perverse team, each specializing in a different brand of terror: psychological torment, sorrowful manipulation, and blunt force trauma. This variety ensures the haunting never feels monotonous and attacks the family on multiple emotional fronts simultaneously. The grandfather's unwitting role is a masterclass in tragic irony, his desire to bless his granddaughter instead invoking a curse, illustrating how evil exploits our purest intentions. The family's dynamic is realistically strained, with arguments over the nature of the threat and how to respond, showing how supernatural siege can fracture human bonds. The Warrens' arrival offers a brief respite of validation, but also escalates the entity's aggression, as it feels its broader plan advancing. The revelation of the spirits as victims adds a necessary layer of pathos, preventing them from being mere monsters and reframing the goal from destruction to compassionate release. Their liberation, achieved through the destruction of the mirror that binds them, provides a complete and emotionally resonant conclusion to their subplot. This careful attention to the case file ensures the film's internal logic remains intact and satisfying, even as the narrative expands to encompass the Warrens' personal apocalypse. Director Michael Chavez's visual strategy for Last Rites is one of controlled escalation and poignant contrast. The 1964 sequences might be imbued with a slightly soft focus and a warmer, almost amber hue, evoking both nostalgia and the organic warmth of life that is under threat. The 1986 scenes, particularly in the Smurl household, could be shot with a sharper, colder clarity, emphasizing the invasive, clinical nature of the haunting. The Warren home is visualized as a fortress of warmth, filled with practical light sources. Lamps, fireplace glow, that create pockets of safety in the darkness. The demon's influence is visually represented by the corruption of this light, with bulbs flickering and dying or casting elongated, unnatural shadows that seem to move independently. Chavez likely uses reflections obsessively, not just in the mirror but in television screens, window panes, and even the surface of a dark liquid, creating a world where the boundary between the real and the reflected is perpetually unstable. The framing often traps characters in tight compositions, using doorways, hallways, and the edges of the frame itself to suggest confinement and surveillance. During the psychic union of Lorraine and Judy, the visual language could shift to a more impressionistic style, with light bleeding at the edges and a shallow depth of field that blurs the physical world to focus on the spiritual connection. The destruction of the mirror would be a symphony of shattering light, with slow-motion fragments capturing the release of the trapped souls as bursts of ethereal energy. This deliberate and symbolic visual approach ensures every shot contributes to the film's overarching themes of memory, reflection, and liberation. The film's spiritual philosophy is one of empowered grace, where divine authority is channeled through human courage and love. The Catholic iconography present, the crucifixes, the holy water, the prayers, are tools, but the film emphasizes they are not autonomous. Their efficacy is directly tied to the faith, intention, and moral purity of the wielder. The demon's murder of Father Gordon is a stark demonstration that symbols and office alone are insufficient without immense personal fortitude. The Warrens' methodology has always been a hybrid, blending church-sanctioned rite with Lorraine's clairvoyance and a deep, practical understanding of supernatural law. Last Rites pushes this to its zenith, suggesting that the ultimate spiritual weapon is a family's unified will when consecrated by faith and love. The final confrontation bypasses traditional exorcism entirely, becoming instead a direct, psychic stand where two generations combine their inherited gifts as a focused beam of spiritual energy. This posits a theology that is intimate and personal, where God works not through distant miracles, but through the strength God placed within human bonds. The miracle of Judy's birth and their final victory are thus two expressions of the same principle. Divine power responding to and amplifying selfless, human love in the face of absolute negation. This theology is profoundly hopeful, suggesting that the sacred is not confined to churches, but lives actively within the love that binds families and communities together against the darkness. The sound design and musical score are engineered to create a visceral, physiological response that mirrors the characters' journeys. The oral landscape of the Smurl home would undergo a sinister transformation, where familiar, comforting sounds are slowly replaced by an unsettling sonic palette. The wrong kind of silence, floorboards creaking under no weight, whispers that seem to come from inside the walls themselves. The cursed mirror might emit a sound just below human hearing, a vibrational discomfort that subconsciously primes characters and audience for dread. Judy's psychic episodes demand a complex audio collage, a cacophony of temporally dislocated sounds. A child's laugh from the 1950s, a scream from the mirror's origin, overlapping prayers in dead languages, creating a sense of traumatic timelessness. Composer Joseph Bishara would likely weave a new, melancholic theme for Judy's isolation, using sparse piano or a solitary violin to convey her loneliness. The demon's motifs would be atonal and aggressive, perhaps utilizing distorted human voices or metallic shrieks that feel like assaults on the ears. The climactic union of mother and daughter would require the score to perform a narrative fusion, with Judy's lonely theme and Lorraine's more assured motifs intertwining and building into a powerful, heroic anthem of legacy. The use of absolute silence in key moments would be as powerful as any sound, making the audience lean in, straining to hear the threat they know is coming. The mirror's destruction would be a cathartic release of all this built-up sonic tension, a crescendo of shattering glass, angelic choir-like releases, and a final, resolving orchestral chord that washes over the audience with a sense of hard-won peace. The film's treatment of legacy is refreshingly ambivalent, recognizing it as a complex inheritance of both power and pain. Ed and Lorraine's legacy is a public monument built on private sacrifice, a narrative of triumph that glosses over nights of terror and psychological toll. Judy does not simply inherit their knowledge. She inherits their enemies, their trauma, and the monumental expectation to continue a work she never chose. Her entire life has been a preparation for a war declared before her first breath, making her struggle with identity a central, tragic conflict. The passing of the torch is not a gift but a fraught negotiation, where Judy must wrestle with the legacy to make it her own, to avoid becoming merely a custodian of her parents' past. Her ultimate acceptance is an act of creative reinterpretation. She takes the raw materials of her inheritance, the sensitivity, the knowledge, the mission, and forges from them a new identity that incorporates her own relationship with Tony and her personal moral code. The film suggests that a legacy only remains alive if it is adapted, not merely adopted. The concluding vision of the future implies that Judy's chapter of the legacy will be different. Perhaps quieter, more psychic, more preventive, allowing the work to evolve with the times. This nuanced view acknowledges the weight of the past while championing the necessity of change, offering a mature perspective on how we honor our history without being enslaved by it. The Conjuring, Last Rites secures its cultural significance by daring to provide a definitive, emotionally generous conclusion in an age of endless franchises. Its box office success as a marketed finale proves a substantial audience appetite for narrative resolution and character-driven closure. The critical discourse it generated, split between horror mechanics and emotional payoff, highlights its dual achievement and the sometimes divergent priorities of reviewers and invested fans. Within the Conjuring universe, it functions as the capstone, giving shape and meaning to the sprawling series of spin-offs that now orbit a completed central narrative. By giving Ed and Lorraine a peaceful retirement, it elevates them from perpetual combatants to fulfilled human beings, granting them a dignity rarely afforded to horror icons. This conclusion allows the broader universe to continue exploring new stories and entities, but always in the shadow of this completed foundational saga. The film's ultimate legacy is its demonstration that mainstream horror can be both commercially successful and emotionally profound, that it can provide not just screams, but tears of catharsis and a lasting sense of poignant satisfaction. It stands as a testament to the power of ending a story well, of letting heroes rest, and of affirming that the light of human connection is, in the end, the only force that can truly dispel any darkness. The prologue's dreadful intimacy establishes a profound theological conflict between creation and annihilation that resonates throughout the film. The demon's assault on a pregnant Lorraine is an attempt to corrupt the very essence of hope and futurity, targeting life at its most vulnerable and promising. This act frames the entity not merely as a malicious spirit, but as a force of existential nihilism, opposed to the continuation of life itself. The stillness following the stillbirth is a vacuum where faith seems abstract and powerless against biological finality. The Warrens' desperate prayer is thus portrayed as an active, violent insistence on possibility, a spiritual counterassault that forces a miracle into being. Judy's revival is therefore a permanent affront to the demon's worldview, a living symbol of a power it cannot comprehend or defeat through brute force. This foundational event sets the stakes for the entire narrative. It is no longer about scaring a family, but about settling a cosmic grudge with generational implications. The demon's subsequent strategy shifts from direct confrontation to psychological and spiritual corrosion, acknowledging it cannot win through force alone. The cursed mirror becomes its instrument of patient revenge, a Trojan horse designed to infiltrate and destroy from within over decades. The Smurl family's torment is thus a secondary objective, a means to lure Judy, the true target, into a position of vulnerability. This narrative depth transforms the film from a simple ghost story into a saga of predestination and defiance, where the past refuses to remain buried and demands a final, conclusive reckoning. Judy Warren's existential dilemma is portrayed with a nuanced understanding of inherited trauma and giftedness. Her clairvoyance is less a superpower and more a form of heightened, involuntary empathy that leaves her psychologically porous. She likely experiences the emotional and historical residue of places and objects as vividly as present reality, creating a cacophonous inner world devoid of peace or privacy. This condition fosters a deep sense of alienation, as she cannot share the overwhelming sensory data that defines her perception of existence. Tony Spera represents a sanctuary of normalcy, his grounded presence offering a tether to a simpler, more linear reality she fears is forever beyond her grasp. Her secret meetings with Father Gordon illustrate a search for spiritual solace outside the combative, artifact-focused paradigm of her parents, seeking redemption rather than tactics. Her impulsive journey to the Smurls is a critical act of self-actualization, an attempt to weaponize her suffering for good and to assert control over the abilities that have controlled her. This decision, while brave, is tragically naive, as she possesses raw power without the disciplined focus or emotional shielding her parents developed over a lifetime. The subsequent possession is the ultimate violation, a hostile merger where the demon uses her own gifts as a doorway to her soul, speaking in the voice of her deepest insecurities. Her triumph is therefore a monumental act of reclamation, where she must first recognize her own consciousness amidst the invading static and then forcefully expel the corruption. This process symbolizes the integration of a fractured self, where she accepts her sensitivity not as a flaw, but as a fundamental, manageable aspect of her identity. By the conclusion, she transitions from a haunted vessel to a conscious channel, mastering the flow of her perceptions rather than being drowned by them. The Smurl family's ordeal is constructed as a classic, almost archetypal haunting that serves as a narrative and tonal baseline. Their home is deliberately ordinary, a canvas of suburban normalcy upon which the supernatural can paint its most terrifying contrasts. The haunting's escalation follows a brutal logic, beginning with subtle psychological warfare designed to make them doubt their sanity before introducing undeniable physical threats. The three entities function as a perverse ensemble, each specializing in a different flavor of fear to comprehensively dismantle the family's sense of security. The grandfather's innocent gift is the engine of the tragedy, a perfect example of how evil propagates through the channels of love and tradition, corrupting benevolent rituals. The family's dynamic is realistically strained under the pressure, with arguments and blame fracturing their unity, demonstrating how supernatural siege exploits human weakness. The Warrens' involvement provides a temporary bastion of expertise, but also acts as a catalyst, provoking the demon to escalate its plans now that its true prey is near. The revelation that the apparitions are tormented victims, not evil spirits, adds a necessary layer of moral complexity, transforming the mission from eradication to compassionate exorcism. Their liberation is tied directly to the destruction of the mirror, providing a thematically resonant conclusion that links their freedom to the Warrens' personal victory. This subplot ensures the film remains firmly rooted in the franchise's haunted house origins, providing a solid foundation of procedural horror upon which the grander personal drama is built. Michael Chavez's directorial approach in Last Rites appears meticulously crafted to visually echo the film's themes of memory, reflection, and legacy. The 1964 prologue might be shot with a softer grain and warmer color temperature, evoking both period authenticity and the fragile, organic warmth of life under threat. The 1986 sequences, particularly within the Smurl residence, could utilize a cleaner, sharper digital clarity that makes the supernatural intrusions feel starkly, violently out of place. The Warren home would be a visual sanctuary, lit by practical sources that cast pools of golden light, creating islands of safety in a sea of expressive, encroaching shadows. The demon's influence could be visualized through the corruption of light itself, bulbs dimming not to darkness but to an eerie, sickly green hue, or shadows that move counter to their source. Chavez likely employs mirrors, windows, and reflective surfaces not just as plot devices, but as persistent visual motifs, suggesting a world where the barrier between dimensions is thin and perpetually reflective. His framing often emphasizes entrapment and observation, using doorways, banisters, and the edges of the frame to create a sense of claustrophobic surveillance. During the psychic convergence of Lorraine and Judy, the visual language might abandon realism for a more impressionistic style, using light flares, lens distortions, and layered imagery to represent the merging of two consciousnesses. The destruction of the mirror would be a cathartic explosion of visual poetry, with slow-motion glass shards capturing released light and perhaps fleeting, peaceful images of the freed spirits. This symbolic and deliberate cinematography ensures the film's aesthetic is a constant, eloquent narrator of its internal conflicts. The film's theological framework is one of immanent grace, where the divine is shown to operate through human agency, love, and collective will. The rituals and sacramentals of the Church are presented as potent tools, but their efficacy is depicted as being directly proportional to the faith, purity of intent, and moral authority of the practitioner. The demon's successful corruption of Father Gordon serves as a sobering lesson that office and knowledge, without unshakable personal fortitude, can be vulnerabilities. The Warrens' unique strength has always lain in their synthesis of Orthodox Catholic practice with Lorraine's unorthodox clairvoyance and their bedrock of mutual, self-sacrificial love. Last Rites culminates this philosophy by presenting the ultimate spiritual weapon not as a recited Latin text, but as the synchronized will of a family, their unique gifts harmonized into a focused beam of spiritual energy. This suggests a God who delegates authority, who empowers believers to act as vessels of divine power through their love and courage. The miracles in the film, Judy's birth and their final victory, are thus framed not as supernatural interventions from on high, but as the culmination of human faith reaching up and meeting divine grace halfway. This empowers the characters and the audience, suggesting that holiness is accessible through love in action, making the spiritual battle deeply personal and profoundly human. It is a theology of hope and empowerment, arguing that the sacred dwells within the bonds we fight to preserve. The auditory landscape of Last Rites is designed to be a pervasive, psychological force that shapes the viewer's experience on a subconscious level. The sound design for the haunting would meticulously warp domestic audio signifiers, turning the comforting hum of a household into a dissonant, threatening drone. The cursed mirror might have an associated sound, a faint, high-pitched harmonic or a deep, almost tectonic pressure, that subtly alters the atmosphere of any room it occupies. Judy's psychic episodes demand a complex, disorienting soundscape, a layered cacophony of emotionally charged audio fragments from different times and traumas, sonically representing her fractured perception. Composer Joseph Bishara would likely introduce a new, plaintive thematic identity for Judy, perhaps utilizing a solo woodwind or a fragile piano melody to convey her isolation and searching. The demon's motifs would be antithetical to this, utilizing atonal string clusters, distorted liturgical chants, and percussive hits that feel like physical blows. The film's emotional turning point, the psychic alliance between mother and daughter, would require the score to perform a narrative alchemy, blending their individual themes into a new, powerful orchestral statement of legacy and unity. The strategic use of deafening silence would be as crucial as sound, creating vacuums of anticipation that make the audience complicit in the fear. The climactic shattering of the mirror would provide the cathartic audio release, a multi-layered explosion of breaking glass, ethereal vocal releases, and a triumphant resolution of the score's central musical tensions, washing over the viewer with a palpable sense of relief and closure. The film's exploration of legacy is remarkably sophisticated, treating it as a dynamic, often burdensome inheritance that must be personally reconstituted. Ed and Lorraine's legacy is a public edifice built on private sacrifice, a narrative of victory that belies a lifetime of psychological scars and moral compromises. Judy inherits not just their knowledge and mission, but the specific enmity of their adversaries and the weight of monumental, unasked-for expectations. Her struggle is to differentiate her own identity from this overwhelming inheritance, to avoid becoming merely a living monument to her parents' past. The passing of the torch is therefore a violent and traumatic transition, a trial where she must nearly be destroyed by the very darkness she is meant to combat in order to claim her birthright on her own terms. Her ultimate acceptance is an act of creative synthesis. She does not merely adopt her parents' methods, but integrates their wisdom with her unique sensitivity and her relationship with Tony, forging a new paradigm for the work. The film posits that a legacy only remains vital if it is adapted and reinterpreted by each generation, not slavishly reproduced. The hopeful future implied for Judy suggests her chapter will be distinct, perhaps more focused on psychic resolution and preventive care, leveraging her gifts in ways her parents could not. This nuanced perspective honors the past while championing evolution, offering a mature metaphor for how individuals can honor their history without being imprisoned by it. The Conjuring, Last Rites secures its cultural impact by defiantly prioritizing emotional resolution over open-ended franchise extension. Its commercial success as a marketed finale demonstrates a significant audience hunger for narrative completion and character-driven denouement. The critical conversation it ignited, often split between assessments of its horror craft and its success as a series conclusion, underscores its achievement in satisfying two distinct sets of audience expectations. Within the expanding Conjuring universe, the film acts as an essential keystone, providing structural and emotional closure to the core narrative around which all other stories revolve. By granting Ed and Lorraine a peaceful, unambiguous retirement, it elevates them from perpetual warriors to fulfilled human beings, granting them a dignity rarely afforded to characters in ongoing horror sagas. This definitive ending actually strengthens the broader universe, allowing spin-offs to explore freely while existing in the shadow of a completed, foundational epic. The film's ultimate legacy is its proof that mainstream, franchise horror can be both immensely profitable and emotionally substantive, that it can deliver chilling sequences while also bringing a poignant, satisfying conclusion to a beloved story. It stands as a testament to the power of finality, to the emotional resonance of letting heroes rest, and to the enduring idea that love, in its most selfless and familial form, is the most potent force for banishing darkness imaginable. The film's prologue meticulously establishes a foundational mythos for the entire Warren saga, presenting a battle not for a house but for a soul at the threshold of existence. The demon's target is not merely Lorraine's body, but the sacred process of birth itself, aiming to pervert creation into a testament of its own nihilistic power. The ensuing silence after the stillbirth is a profound narrative vacuum, a moment where hope seems extinguished and faith feels like a hollow abstraction against medical reality. The Warrens' desperate, unified prayer thus becomes an act of spiritual defiance, so potent it bends reality, reclaiming life from a state of absolute finality. Judy's first breath is therefore a permanent victory etched into the fabric of her being, marking her as a divine contradiction to the entity's core purpose. This origin story reframes the ensuing decades as a prolonged Cold War, with the demon strategizing a more insidious revenge that targets the mind and legacy rather than the body. The cursed mirror is its chosen weapon of delayed destruction, a patient repository of malice designed to ensnare its true target through proxy suffering. The Smurl family's haunting is thus a calculated feint, a tragic but necessary step in a larger, more personal campaign of spiritual annihilation. This elevated narrative architecture transforms a standard exorcism plot into an epic of generational conflict, where the past is a relentless creditor demanding payment with interest. Judy Warren's internal conflict is rendered with profound sensitivity, depicting her gifts as a form of existential burden that fractures her sense of self. Her clairvoyance operates as a traumatic empathy, forcing her to constantly experience the emotional residues of tragedies not her own as immediate and overwhelming sensations. This perpetual psychic noise creates a barrier to authentic human connection, as her reality is fundamentally alien and incommunicable to those without her perception. Tony Spera stands as a symbol of the ordinary world she covets, his linear and unhaunted consciousness offering a sanctuary of simplicity she fears is forever lost to her. Her clandestine meetings with Father Gordon reveal a soul seeking pastoral care and theological understanding, longing to frame her suffering within a context of grace rather than paranormal strategy. Her decision to intervene with the Smurls is a pivotal, if reckless, act of self-definition, an attempt to transmute her lifelong curse into a purposeful tool for salvation. This endeavor, however, backfires catastrophically, demonstrating that power without discipline and emotional shielding is a dangerous liability. The subsequent possession represents the ultimate perversion of her identity, where the demon weaponizes her own sensitivity, using it as a conduit to amplify its voice within her psyche. Her triumph is therefore a phoenix-like rebirth, requiring her to locate and assert her own consciousness amidst the invasive static and reclaim sovereignty over her fractured self. This journey from afflicted heir to empowered custodian of her own gifts forms the film's most compelling and transformative character arc, offering a powerful allegory for mastering one's inherited psychological landscape. The Smurl haunting operates with a clinical, almost pedagogical precision, serving as a grim refresher of the franchise's core supernatural rules. Their home is a stage for a classic haunting escalation, where phenomena progress from subtle psychological manipulation to overt physical violence in a methodical, terrifying curriculum. The three linked entities provide a comprehensive study in spectral torment, each specializing in a different aspect of fear to dismantle the family's defenses holistically. The grandfather's role injects a potent dose of tragic irony, his loving gift becoming the engine of his family's damnation, illustrating evil's proficiency at corrupting pure intentions. The family's dynamic deteriorates under the siege, showcasing how supernatural terror can exploit and amplify pre-existing familial tensions and doubts. The Warrens' professional intervention offers a temporary return to their established methodology, a familiar dance of investigation, validation, and confrontation. The revelation that the apparitions are enslaved victims, not voluntary perpetrators, adds crucial moral shading, demanding a response of liberation rather than simple destruction. Their freedom is ingeniously tied to the resolution of the Warrens' personal crisis, making the destruction of the mirror an act of dual redemption. This subplot ensures the film remains satisfying as a standalone haunted house narrative, grounding the higher-stakes personal drama in the tangible, visceral terror of a home under siege. Michael Chavez's visual direction for the finale seems engineered to create a poignant dialogue between warmth and coldness, safety and violation. The 1964 sequences might employ a filmic texture and a sepia-tinged warmth, visually associating the past with both nostalgia and organic, vulnerable life. The contemporary 1986 scenes could be rendered with a sharper, more sterile clarity, making the supernatural intrusions feel like stark, violent tears in the fabric of normalcy. The Warren home is depicted as a fortress of curated warmth, its lighting designed in pools and pockets that define spaces of temporary safety against the surrounding gloom. The demon's influence manifests visually as a corruption of this light, with sources flickering in unnatural rhythms or casting shadows that move with malicious intent independent of their objects. Chavez likely utilizes reflective surfaces as a persistent visual motif, creating a world where every window or polished surface holds the potential to reveal a hidden, watching presence. His compositional style often employs tight framing and deep focus to simultaneously create claustrophobia and reveal hidden threats lurking in the background. The psychic union of mother and daughter would necessitate a departure from realism, perhaps using ethereal lighting, superimposed imagery, or a shift to a stark high-contrast palette to visualize their merged consciousness. The destruction of the mirror would be the film's visual and thematic catharsis, a moment where light, long trapped and corrupted, is finally and explosively released in a pure, cleansing form. This deliberate and symbolic visual language ensures every frame contributes to the narrative's emotional and thematic weight. Thus, The Conjuring, Last Rites stands as a thematically rich and emotionally conclusive final chapter, masterfully weaving its signature supernatural horror into a poignant exploration of legacy, faith, and familial love. It transcends the confines of a mere ghost story to deliver a powerful allegory about embracing one's inherited burdens and transforming them into a source of strength. By centering its climax on the psychic and spiritual alliance between mother and daughter, the film affirms that the most potent force against existential darkness is not solitary heroism, but the unified will of a family bound by selfless devotion. Providing Ed and Lorraine Warren with a peaceful earned retirement, it offers a rare and dignified closure for horror icons, satisfying long-term investment while affirming the series' core thesis: that in a world haunted by ancient evils, the light we kindle for each other is the only light that truly and permanently endures.